Hello, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Beth, and today I am coming to you with Chapter 7 of Wired for Story by Lisa Crum. We are over halfway through the book, guys. Yay! All right, so Chapter 7 is about conflict and how we use conflict to create change in a story. The cognitive secret is that the brain is wired to stubbornly resist change, even if it is good. And the story secret is that story is all about change. So this results only from unavoidable conflict. And it has this great quote from Anatole France. It says, "All changes, even the most longed for, have their melancholy, for what we leave behind us is a part of ourselves. We must die to one life before we can enter into another." Okay, so it begins talking about the fact that our brain does not like change. So even if it is a good change, like we go to the same person several times to get our haircut and they keep butchering it. And so we decide we're going to go to a new hairstylist, and then we start having anxiety about going to a new barber or hairstylist. It's because our brain is resisting change, even though we know that our best friend went to that barber and they did a bang up job. And the one we're at right now absolutely hacked our hair off and almost made us bald the last time. And, we don't want to go there again. But the comfort of going, even the comfort of knowing that our hair is going to look a mess when we get done there is still part of a regime. And when we change that, our mind will balk at the process. Neuroscience writer Jonah Lehrer points out in his article or book, How We Decide. He says, confidence is comforting. The lure of certainty is built into the brain at a very basic level. It's a big part of our sense of well being. So, Timothy D. Wilson, who is a social psychologist, says people are masterful spin doctors, rationalizers, and justifiers of threatening information and go to great lengths to maintain a sense of well being. We don't like change and we don't like conflict. We do our best to avoid them. So, in a world where it takes us 10 minutes to decide where to eat, how are we going to translate that kind of existence into a book that is meant to be full of conflict and change in a short amount of time? A story's job is to tackle exactly how we handle that conflict, which boils down to the battle between fear and desire. We survived because we're risk takers, but our goal is to stay safe by not changing. So, story and the conflict in story is actually what helps us to maintain our safety in real life. When it comes to conflict, your reader must be able to see the things that are not there. So that conflict must be palpable long before it rises to the surface. And the potential for conflict gives urgency to everything and will have your reader wanting to continue on. Um, since we are social creatures, a need to belong is as basic as our survival as our need for food and oxygen, according to neuropsychiatrist Richard Restick. So a new human goal was born that kindergarten teachers the world over still use, and that's working well with others. So if there's conflict in a book where you're not working well with others, or the conflict is hurting, because conflict does hurt, that's something that your readers can feel and pulls them in, and then they learn from it and they still want to continue in the story. And your story needs to be between a rock and a hard place pretty much the whole time. Whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is you're talking about, there is a conflict in it. In accordance with the golden rule, we want to steer clear of this and never put anyone else in that position either. And our problem as writers is that this includes our protagonist. So as we're writing, we want to make everything smooth for them, but instead we need to have the conflict and make it go all wobbly. Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So the title of this is Suspense is the Handmaiden of Conflict, right there. And it says, picture the hairline crack in the otherwise solid wall of before. The cause of this fissure is often the answer to the question, why does this story have to start at this very minute? Bum, bum, bum. So the story's first hairline crack and its resulting offshoots are like fault lines running through the center of the world that you're creating and completely undermining absolutely every stinking thing. There are two opposing forces, and the protagonist is typically caught between them. So these are kind of almost a versus, a battleground. And here are a few of the most common verses. And you need to keep in mind that most stories have more than one. So you're going to have 2, 3, 4, 12, however many of these, or something less common. But here are the most commons. What the protagonist believes is true versus what is actually true. What the protagonist wants versus what the protagonist actually has. What the protagonist wants versus what is expected of her. The protagonist versus herself. The protagonist inner goal versus the protagonist external goal. The protagonist fear versus the protagonist goal, external, internal, or otherwise. The protagonist versus the antagonist versus mercy or the appearance thereof. So a story takes place in the time that is between the before and the after, and in the space between the versus, as the protagonist maneuvers within two conflicting realities, trying to bring them into alignment and solve their problem. Meanwhile, the suspense builds as the reader wonders how on earth these realities, which seem to be moving further and further apart, will ever come together. So we have to poke at the protagonist over and 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 over again, as many times and ways as we can, to keep the story fresh and moving and make her get to that change that she needs to get to. And here are some 3 important facts about how our brain processes info. The brain is wired to hunt for meaningful patterns in everything in order to predict what will happen next based on the repetition or alteration of patterns. So you have to make sure that there are meaningful patterns for the reader to find and that you're not just kind of throwing things into the story because you feel like it needs to be there. Number 2, we run scenario on the page through our own personal experience of similar events, whether real or imagined, to see whether it is in fact believable. If the reader cannot find it believable or close enough to believable that pieces of it are believable and they can understand how it would happen in that world, they're not going to want to continue reading. And number 3, we are hardwired to love problem solving. So when we figure something out, the brain releases an intoxicating rush of neurotransmitters telling you that you're doing a good job. And that is the pleasure of a story. You find out what's really going on. Okay? That being said, one of the big issues that writers have in their writing is being worried about revealing too much and not having enough suspense. Readers know more than you think they do most of the time, as those of us who are both readers and writers, which are pretty much hopefully everyone who's a reader and a writer, can actually confirm when we're reading other people's stuff. When we're writing our own stuff, it kind of flies out of our mind. So we have to remember that our readers are reading between the lines, in the lines, beside the lines, all of the lines, and they are understanding more than we give them credit for. So we need to know that they're doing that, and we need to know that trying to hide behind this ingenious plot line and not reveal too much is just basically not worth it. So we have today's story myth and story reality. So the myth is that withholding information for the big reveal is what keeps readers hooked. However, the reality is that withholding information often robs the story of what really hooks readers. The big reveal is something like a big twist near the end that changes everything that came before it in the story, kind of like Darth Vader's Luke, I am your father. It just changes everything you've seen. These reveals are shocking and completely believable the second we hear them, because up until that moment, we couldn't quite shake the feeling that there was more going on than met the eye. This is because the writers give us specific patterns of hints all the way through. And so even though it made sense up until that moment, now it makes even more sense because the story has changed and all of the little jagged edges that didn't seem to fit now completely interlock. It is only because of that pattern that it makes sense. So when we don't make sure that we have that pattern and we're just holding everything back, and then at the end we're like, bam, that's right. And everybody's going, I did not see that. What are you talking about? Why is that? No. And there's no reason for it at all. So, yes, if we don't know there's intrigue, then there is no intrigue. There must be a specific hint or tell along the way alerting us, and these hints and tells need to stand out and make sense in their own right before the big reveal. We want them to figure it out. And there's a whole bunch more. You can basically just show your hand. Uh, you can keep a few of your cards up your sleeve and just mete out the other details along the way, giving hints and even sometimes outright information to keep the reader intrigued and then throw in that twist at the end. Finally, we are at the checkpoint. Chapter 7 checkpoint. Number 1. Have you made sure that the basis of future conflict is sprouting beginning on page 1? Can we glimpse the avenues that will lead to conflict? Can we anticipate the problems that the protagonist might not yet be aware of? I hope so. I'll need to reread everything I've written. I've been in a really bad place in my head, like really blocked off. I can't remember half of the story that I've written because my brain is just not in a writing place right now. Have you established the verses so that the reader is aware of the specific rock and hard place the protagonist is wedged between? And can we anticipate how he will have to change in order to get what he wants? Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's there. I've got that taken care of. Does the conflict force the protagonist to take action, whether it's to rationalize it away or actually change? Imagine what you would want to avoid if you were the protagonist and then make her face it. Number 4, have you made sure that the story gains something by withholding specific facts for a big reveal later? Because if it doesn't gain anything by holding that back, then don't be afraid to put it in the story now. Otherwise, your readers are going to get bored and not care about the big reveal. And finally, once the reveal is known, will everything that happened up to that point still make sense in light of this new information? Remember, you have to have a story that makes complete sense without the reveal and still makes complete sense and even more sense after the reveal. So that is all for chapter 7. I hope you guys are enjoying these. I know they're a little long, but I am absolutely positively having fun making these for you, and we'll try to compact the information just a little bit more next time. If you have picked up the book and are reading along with me or are planning on picking it up, please let me know. I would love to hear that from you guys. And just any comments you have, leave them down below. Give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new, all that good jazz, and I'll see you again soon for another chat. Bye-bye.